We now welcome Curtis Miller. He owns a fish house and sells oysters, and he's also a third-generation oysterman, and he serves on the Oyster Advisory Work Group Board, and he's based out of Port Lavaca. Welcome to Community Crossroads.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mr. Miller, talk to us about the history behind this conflict, and specifically the conflict surrounding oysters.
Well, back in 2016, Texas Parks and Wildlife approached the work group about adopting a traffic light system. They would open and close bays based on the oyster populations. Well, after about a year, we saw that was a disaster because it concentrated all the boats in 2 or 3 small bays, which is what happened with the bays they're wanting to close, Mesquite Bay, Carlos Bay, and Ayers Bay. It concentrated all the boats in those small bays. Well, the recreational fishermen didn't like that. We don't like that. We'd rather be spread up and down the coast. But the recreational fishermen stirred them up because to see all those boats in these small bays. But you know, everybody needs to remember, it wasn't our choice. Parks and Wildlife forced all the boats into those bays. And you know, as far as destroying the reefs, that's totally untrue. Working a reef helps the reef, spreads out the oysters, keeps the silt and slime off the top, so new generations of oysters can spat set on the existing reefs. So that's where we're at today.
Y'all are an integral part of the cycle of life there.
Absolutely. One oyster, you know, there's millions, there's thousands of acres up and down the Texas coast that's in prohibited waters by either the health department or the Parks and Wildlife. So those oysters never get harvested. One oyster, there's millions of oysters in those areas. One oyster produces 50 to 100 million spawn and larvae. So, I mean, they're a proficient reproducer. We're not endangering the reefs by working them. They're designed to reproduce, just astounding.
You're part of the pollination kind of process.
Exactly.
And what about the recent impacts to you and your oystering? The Texas Parks and Wildlife did close almost all of the Texas coast to oystering a few weeks ago. How has that impacted your bottom line at home?
Oh, absolutely. It's impacted it greatly because we're not able to supply our customers, all our customers. We're having to kind of ration out oysters to our customers, and they're having to search, you know, other venues, which is very short supply on oysters. It's not a good situation. It's definitely affected our business. I would say it's off 75 to 80% due to these bay closures.
What do you think Texas Parks and Wildlife should do? Should it be one bay? Should it be something more balanced? Or what do you think is the solution to preserving our oysters, but also preserving people's livelihoods?
Well, the solution is for Parks and Wildlife to quit trying to manage Mother Nature. It doesn't work. I've seen over my 40 to 50 years in the business, at least 3 times due to flooding from the Guadalupe River, kill every oyster in the San Antonio Bay and other bays, and I'm talking about in the prohibited areas also. 100% of the oysters were dead. And within 2 to 3 years, because like I said earlier, one oyster produces 50 to 100 million spawn, within 2 to 3 years, we had more oysters in the bays than we'd ever had, because that flood kind of washed all the shell, made it more acceptable for the spat set, and you know, just let nature do its job. And that's what the Parks and Wildlife needs to understand. They can't manage the bays. This is not a little fish aquarium that they can micromanage. The bays will take care of themselves.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Miller, for coming on Community Crossroads. I do hope to reach out to the other side of the issue on this very important topic. And thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up, don't go anywhere. We get a preview of the GOP ballot in the November general election.